Hello, Neok here, the Slant HQ. Today we are going to read the Espionage, Yellow Circle, Busted, and Resistance 101, and then in the next video we will read the Reunion Part 2, the Reunion Part 3, Mars Pirates, and Seers of the Void, and then in the next video will be a Slant Song. Today will be a busy day because we need to catch up with Seers of the Void and the two episodes that will post, the two blog post episodes that we'll post today on this blog, 6:30 and 7 respectively. We will start with the Espionage. The Slants are at the Hexagon base when Hexless starts talking to Kyrus again about this new faction, but Jackson stops him once again. Dr. Goodwell then fakes drinking some of his own poisoned coffee, which no one, not even the other Slants excluding Vectum Box, knew was fake. He claims the Hexagons said it was the wrong chemical, and goes to the nurse's office to get an idea of the inner workings of the base and how the doctors treat their patients. At the nurse's office, Dr. Goodwell discovers that they use nanobots to cure their injured and ill. He says he's fine, though, and just needed some rest, and then rides a bullet train to the part of the base where Remus is located. Meanwhile, Hexless can be seen looking at a television screen within the base, looking worried. The TV screen is tuned to a news story about Lance Staples and how he's been lost at sea. Kyrus asks why Hexless looks so worried, and Hexless says that he doesn't like failure of any conquester. Meanwhile, Vectum and the rest overhear Hexless talking to a higher despot about his new Hexagon faction, and the despot puts it into effect, but makes Hexless sign his real name on the paper, which he does, but then shreds it. Before he shreds it, Kyrus sees that his name has a D, an I, and an S, possibly more than one of each. Vectum now assigns each Slant to a mission. The warden must pose as a reporter for the base newspaper and try to investigate the new faction and attempt to get Hexless' real name. Slug must capture Klubish, a talkative Hexagon agent, and get information from him. And Vectum himself will pretend to be a superfan of Administrator Jackson to get the name of the new faction. Slug asks multiple times whether or not to kill or hurt Klubish, but Vectum keeps saying no. Slug captures Klubish, who says he knows nothing except for the fact that Hexless just recently arrived here, and that Klubish himself just joined to get away from his home on Neog, home of the Neogi, but now he wants out too. Slug shrinks Charlotte and gives her to Klubish, who then joins Slug and the Slants. The warden doesn't find much, only that Hexless never takes off his mask, and that his name starts with DRID. But Vectum finds a ton. He really gets Administrator Jackson talking, and he explains that the new faction is the Critigan Hex, and that Jackson himself is really Jackalus. Bum, bum, bum. Meanwhile, using white magic to wake him up, Dr. Goodwell actually talks to Remus, but Remus is hard to understand as he is in a vat of liquid. A Qual Hexagon agent, hoping to work up the ranks, spots Goodwell, sees his white magic residue, and fights him. The Qual wins, though, and talks to superiors about what to do with Goodwell. Talk about sending him to the Yellow Circle factories, a name that sounds familiar. Meanwhile, Adzon accidentally shoots his hologram that was making him look like a Numbook and exposes himself. They are both then sent to the factories. To be continued, in this episode, Yellow Circle, Dr. Goodwell and Adzon are shipped to a weapons and mecha factory in order to do slave labor. Once they are there, Adzon and Goodwell find out that they have to do labor for Yellow Circle Robotics, an exotic weapons company that was previously thought to be innocent. In reality, Yellow Circle is actually the manufacturing wing of the Hexagons that employs a large amount of slave labor. Dr. Goodwell remembers that Kyrus put many stock investments into Yellow Circle, unknowingly helping the Hexagons. He was never that bad of an egg. After being drafted from the factory, Adzon and Goodwell meet a Taila, methane alien named Lavada, who shows them a secret warehouse containing about 10 mechas. After that, Lavada shows both Slants a few members of the Resistance against the Hexagons that she has formed. After meeting the Resistance members, Dr. Goodwell, along with Adzon, join the Resistance, so that they can finish the mechas, escape, and save Remus. To be continued. Oh, also, this is a Taila, methane alien, made by Callum Stormleaf and Spore, and we will now read Busted. The Slants are in the Hexagon base's main lobby with Hexless when Kyrus asks Hexless why he was acting so nervous when the news mentioned that Lance Staples was lost at sea. Hexless responds that he isn't Lance and threatens to demote Kyrus for what he said. After that, Hexless mutters under his breath, "Lance Staples lost then, but you won't lose again," confusing Kyrus. Hexless also tells Kyrus to meet him after the next mission. After Hexless's mission is over, he meets up with Kyrus in a private room and tells him that Hexless's real name is Dridigus and that he knows the Slants are spies posing as Hexagon recruits. By now, both Indy and Charlie have blown their cover. Hexless also says that the Slants need to join the Kryptonian Hex, or he will blackmail the rest of the Hexagons about how the Slants' true identity, or he will send them to the Yellow Circle factory. After he hears this, Kyrus leaves the room and explains the situation to the other Slants, who discuss what to do over the 2 days, with frequent annoying checks by Dridigus every few hours, and eventually decide that joining the Kryptonian Hex is not something they can do, because it would be too shameful, even more so than joining the Hexagons, and that they need to find Remus, Adzon, and Goodwill. In between that time, Vecna talks to Klubij and makes a deal with him so that he becomes a backing agent who will be a spy in the place of the Slants. At roughly 1.5 days pass, the Slants meet up with Dridigus and confess that they will not join the Kryptonian Hex. Dridigus then forces the Slants to go to the main lobby of the Hexagon base, where Dridigus tells all the Hexagons about the Slants' secret identities. Expecting a non-violent arrest, all the Slants are surprised when they are attacked by the guards, but are sent to the medical bay before going to Yellow Circle, after being healed by the nanobots which access the patient's body by tearing a hole, then healing it. The Slants are shipped to the Yellow Circle factory. They meet up with Dr. Goodwill, Adzon, Levada, and other Resistance members, join the Resistance, and race against the clock to save Remus. To be continued. Resistance 101. While the other Slants start working in the Yellow Circle factory and get acquainted with all the other Resistance members, they notice a familiar face. That familiar face is Franz, an ally of the GTO and a former Azrahor office worker who fought against the Hexagons only to be drafted in the Yellow Circle as a slave. After meeting the Slants, Franz decides to start making fun of and joking at the expense of the Yellow Circle guards in order to distract them from the Resistance's planning meetings and detours from the factory to their secret base, where the Resistance is making their many secret mechas. Things go fine for a few days, with the Resistance doing more work than ever, with Franz's help keeping them a secret, until Dridigus, still disguised as Hexless, shows up to the Yellow Circle factory, saying that he will free any slaves working here that join the Kryptonian Hex. He also says that anyone who wants to join the Kryptonian Hex can raise their hand. Not a single hand is raised, surprising Hexless. After that, he goes back to the main Hexagon base to do more of his duties, including procuring a mind control chip for Remus to make him an evil living weapon. After the Resistance finds this out, their leader, Levada, schedules a meeting at 11:30 p.m. while everyone else is asleep. During the meeting, Levada blushes when she mentions Remus, showing that she has a crush on him. After the short meeting, the Resistance finishes the mechas, and they wait until midnight to bring out. To be continued next video in the Reunion Part 2, Part 3, Mars Pirates and Seers of the Void.